Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. His grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home.
I'd like to share prayer from the Jewish liturgy, this being the eve of Election Day. I thought the most important prayer I could offer would be a prayer for our country. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your Spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry, and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us all say, Amen.
Well, good evening and welcome to our gathering tonight. My name is Peter Smith. I'm the religion editor with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I'm honored to moderate this discussion with two clergy members with whom I've had the privilege of interacting for a number of years now. And also I see many of you out in the gallery that I recognize, and greetings to all of you, and we look forward to this discussion tonight. Let me start by introducing our speakers tonight, and they'll of course be well known to members of your own congregations, but as we get to know each other. Father Nick Vaskov is a Roman Catholic priest who serves as pastor of Christ Our Savior Parish on Pittsburgh's North Side, as well as the director of the Shrines of Pittsburgh, which are 5 churches with unique historical and spiritual significance. Father Vaskov holds a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from Duquesne University, a baccalaureate in Sacred Theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, and a licentiate in Sacred Theology from the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, also in Rome. In addition to his parish ministry, Father Vaskov has previously served as Vice Rector of St. Paul Seminary in Pittsburgh, Executive Director of Communications, and Director of the Department of Liturgy and Worship for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers has served as the Rabbi and Cantor for the Tree of Life congregation in Pittsburgh since the summer of 2017. He moved here after spending decades in ministry in New Jersey and Long Island. He received a BA from Rutgers University, an MA in Jewish education from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and studied privately with Cantor Zvi Aroni before graduating from the Cantorial School of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. After the horrific morning of October 27th, 2018, when a heavily armed gunman began a murderous rampage in the Tree of Life Synagogue, Rabbi Myers, who survived the attack, has set about sending the key message that love is stronger than hate. Rabbi Myers contends that a lack of understanding of our neighbors leads to fear and sometimes loathing, which can lead to acts of violence. Rabbi Myers believes if we are ever to remove the H word from our society, it must begin with our pledging not to use that word in our speech, just as he has done in honor of the 11 lives lost on that day. So with that, let's begin our discussion. I'll begin with some questions of our speakers, and then we'll move on to question and answer. If you have questions, you can submit them through chat. I promise I am still, even though we've been doing Zoom for a number of months, I'll do my best to handle the whole scrolling of the chat feature, and we'll do our best to get in as many questions as we can. And I'll start with a 2-part question for both of you. And to some extent, you've already answered this with your actions with the memorials tonight, but I'll ask anyway. Could you discuss, in general, the importance of memorial and remembering in the Jewish and Catholic traditions? I know we're speaking today on All Souls Day, so Father Nick, if you could address that particular tradition. And also, I know we're coming up on November 5th, which in the Hebrew calendar this year will be the actual 1-year point for the yahrzeit or prayer in honor of the 11 whose lives were lost. So Rabbi Myers, maybe you could speak to that. And I'll also, the second part of the question would be, what sorts of things can Roman Catholics do to appropriately commemorate the massacre of the 11 Jews at the Tree of Life Synagogue? Father Nick, do you want to start off?
Sure. Thank you, Peter, and it's so good to be with everyone on this night. We have a beautiful opportunity to gather, as Peter said, on All Souls Day, a day that the Church sets apart for those who have died, and not just those who have died recently, and not just those members of the Catholic Church who have died, but truly to remember all who have died. And so we gathered tonight in prayer, as we so often do, to be able to remember our deceased loved ones. It's important for us because the idea of remembering is more than just a calling to mind. It truly is a praying for, it truly is a doing again. It really, in a sense, reminds us that they are present, that they are not gone. And so we are able to hold them in our hearts as we trust that they are with God. And it's nothing new for us. What we do when we are here in celebrating Mass, we don't just think about what Jesus did, but we do it again. And I know that that is drawn from the Jewish tradition. For instance, in celebrating the Passover meal, it isn't just remembering what your ancestors have gone through, but it is doing again what they did to be freed from slavery in Egypt. And so that whole idea of memorial is so important for us because just as we do not want to forget the tragic moments of those days 2 years ago so that we would never do them again, experience them again so that we can grow as a result of them, that trust that we can increase love and faith and hope in light of those tragedies. So too in recalling the death of loved ones, we do the same thing, that we can grow in a remembrance of their faith, of their love, to strive to be more like them in the ways in which they were just and virtuous, and to commend them to God, that they might be with him forever and that we might see them again. That's a huge part of our remembering, that in the funeral prayers of the Catholic Mass, we say, the bonds of friendship and affection which knit us as one throughout this life do not unravel with death. And so in our remembering, we have a wonderful opportunity to pray for, but also ourselves to grow as a result of the love of those who have gone before us.
I would say that our observances are not too dissimilar. We don't have one day in the calendar year where we recall all of our loved ones who have passed, like the Roman Catholic Church that has All Saints' Day. In the Jewish faith, we observe the passing of loved ones on each of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Those of you in the Roman Catholic Church would be certainly familiar with Passover, but within the Roman Catholic, you would be more familiar with the Feast of the Tabernacles, and you'd be familiar with the other one, the Pentecost. So we call that Sukkot, and we call that Shavuot, but it's the 3 pilgrimage festivals, as well as on Yom Kippur. So 4 times a year, when we gather for our holiest days, we recall, reflect, and remember upon all of our loved ones who have passed. Adding to that, each of us has the obligation to recall specifically every year the date of passing of our loved ones. In Yiddish, we call that Yahrzeit. It literally means year time, which is anniversary. So all of us within the Jewish faith, when we recall the anniversary of the passing of a parent, God forbid the passing of a child, the passing of a sibling, the passing of a spouse, we observe that date every year on the calendar, and we call that a Yahrzeit. Just a word about our calendar, because that might be confusing, particularly to some of you who are Roman Catholics. The Jewish calendar is not based upon the solar year, it's based upon the lunar year. The lunar year is approximately 354 days. That's an 11-day difference. So if we would continue in that same pattern year after year after year, our holidays would become earlier and earlier till Passover would be celebrated in December. So to do that, we observed not a leap day, but we had a month. I could go into more detail, but I don't want to overwhelm you with too much math, just a little bit of math. But what it means is that the solar and lunar dates do not align every single year. When there's a leap year, there's 30 more days. When there's not a leap year, we lose 11 days. So you can see after 3 years, we're 33 days behind. So we had the leap month. So that means that October 27th this year in the Jewish calendar, meaning the lunar calendar, is not observed on October 27th. This year it's observed beginning the evening of November 4th. That date will change every year. It may be a week later in November, or it could be a week or 2 earlier in October. So somewhere between October, the mid-October to mid-November would be where that date would fall. And what do? We light a memorial candle that burns for 25 hours. We attend worship services and offer a prayer where we praise God. It doesn't mention death, For those of you who are Roman Catholic, it's very similar to the doxology in terms of text and in terms of content. So we have a comparable sort of prayer, and we praise God, we reflect, we remember on the good qualities and characteristics of our loved ones, and how we can become better human beings through those good qualities. So even though we do it more frequently than the Roman Catholics do, based on what I heard and what I know, very, very similar, which is indeed one of those pieces of the sacred bridge that does flow back and forth between our two faiths. I'll now leave it to Father Vaskov for part B of the question.
Thank you, Rabbi. And just to repeat the second part of the question, Peter stated, and part of this was already answered in the brief lighting of the candles that we had at the beginning, but what can the Roman Catholic Church do to appropriately commemorate the massacre of the 11 Jews at the Tree of Life 2 years ago? And that was really the fundamental question of the evening. Connected with Rabbi Myers, knowing that the second anniversary of the massacre was coming up, and sort of asking, how could we pray for him and for the congregations there? Not just saying, well, we want to pray for them because it's important to, that's part of it, but is there a particular way to pray for? And then I think it really grew out of that, is there a particular way to act in light of that day and this second anniversary? Lighting candles, having the moments of prayer and remembrance, and not just the 11 candles lit, but you can see even behind them the blue and white candles that have been burning in the church here since the second anniversary of the massacre, as that memorial, as that remembrance. And part of that is, as Rabbi said, coming to know the lives of those who have gone before us, as they have been broadcast over these years, particularly in the days following that horrific day. Coming to learn about those lives that were lost, the goodness that was within them, and working to emulate that in our lives in some way. And continuing to work in our own communities, our faith community, the communities where we live, to really preach and to teach and to live by example and by word what it truly means to love our neighbor as ourself. In the Gospels, when Jesus is asked, what are the greatest commandments? It is love God above all, echoing the Shema Israel, as well as love your neighbor as yourself. And we can't do the second without doing the first. In loving God, we recognize our relationship with him, and we come to know so much about ourselves. And it is only knowing ourselves and the things that may work to build up resentment or hatred or anger in our own hearts, that then we can truly love our neighbor by seeking to rid ourselves of those, and calling our neighbors to that, calling the church to that, and calling each other to that, and that we hold ourselves to that standard. And then to be able to reach out and to say, how can we love you more? And in particular to Rabbi Myers, to the congregation, that was the impetus of all that. How can we love you more? Not just lip service, but truly, how can we witness the faith and the love that is in our hearts for you as neighbors, as children of the Father? And so in particular tangible ways, I think tonight is a first step to having this conversation. I wish it didn't have to be a virtual conversation tonight, but the circumstances of the world make this the safest and the most reasonable way to do this. But I hope it becomes tangible, real, reaching out ways to do that, coming to know about each other's traditions, coming to celebrate together, coming to live together in a real and true way. So I wish I had more formal ways right now, but I think that this conversation is going to lead to what the church, and not just one parish, but I hope the church in this community in Pittsburgh and throughout the world can come to do to respect, support, and honor our Jewish brothers and sisters all the more.
It's interesting because you obviously, we're on All Souls Day, and there are certain ritual things that can be done, but you've obviously seen a much more expansive view of what commemoration means, that it involves ethics, it involves kind of a holistic approach to bridging gaps, to finding ways to do things in honor of those lost. And that certainly rings true to what the commemorations have been last year and this year both, which also included Torah study, all kinds of acts of community service all over Pittsburgh as well. So there's an interesting parallel there as well, that it's ritual, but it's much more than ritual, isn't it?
I would say, Peter, it's what we take with us when we exit the buildings. What type of people are we? Are we the same people outside of our houses of worship that we are inside our houses of worship? Or do we leave that persona behind, God forbid, inside the church, inside the synagogue, and are a different person outside? And I would certainly think that the ways that through the Jewish community we have commemorated the loss of our 11 martyrs are ways that we can work together with the Roman Catholic Church. We could study Bible together. The Hebrew Bible is also Christian Bible. Plenty of opportunity to study and look at different perspectives on how we understand our texts, different ways that we can appreciate the music of our faiths that expresses our piety and our wants and needs, whether it's just listening to Amazing Grace that we just heard sung so beautifully before, or other wonderful pieces of liturgy that can be sung from both, to be able to explore so much more, to discover how much more we do have in common that most people don't recognize or even realize. And I think once we take those commonalities and we work on them together, it grows a relationship, and it grows us to see we're not very different from each other, despite the fact that we're of different faiths.
Thank you. These answers actually kind of stole some of the thunder from my next question, which is what are some of the potential ways to grow the relationship between the Roman Catholic and Jewish communities? But I wonder if we could delve a little bit into history here, because there is a very significant landmark that we just passed the, I believe, 55th anniversary of the adoption of the document Nostra Aetate by the Second Vatican Council, which had great significance in repairing the historic and deep wounds of the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Jewish community, and the way that it embraced the Jewish heritage, and basically recognized, with the church recognizing that it was a co-inheritor or heir of the same tradition. Father Nick, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the significance of that document, and about the impact that it has had on the ground. That, you know, this wasn't just a bureaucratic document that sat on the shelf. I believe it's had real concrete impact.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, the 55th anniversary was actually October 28th. And it really was a major shift, I think, not just in teaching, but in practice in the church, like you said. There were so many very deep wounds between the Catholic and Jewish communities. And with the document, which essentially something Rabbi and I talked about in preparation for tonight was, and as he has mentioned, there is so much more that we have in common than that makes us different. And so to be able to hold that as the foundation upon which we grow together and work together and seek to love one another, that was really the whole essence of Nostra Aetate and the teaching of the Second Vatican Council, that this would be something that would not just be envisioned, but truly be lived. And so there are so many things. I know Pope John Paul II had an extremely close relationship with the chief rabbi of Rome, and they would often gather to pray and to talk and to meet, or just to dine together and to speak of the issues facing their respective communities and the issues facing the world as a whole and how they might work to be as one. Here in Pittsburgh, I know that Bishop John Wright, who later became a cardinal, was extremely close with the Jewish community and tried to strengthen those bonds. And many of those things last until today, including where rabbis from the city go into our Catholic elementary schools and high schools to share different aspects of the Jewish faith and practices and beliefs, and to build up that mutual respect as well. Again, it just echoes what we're striving to do tonight. With that document, it really, I think, may be one of the documents of the Second Vatican Council that, while very quietly, because I think it may not be something that people reflect on all that often, may actually have had the greatest impact in Catholic teaching and practice, and seeking to uphold and to support and to respect our Jewish brothers and sisters in all things, and something I'm very grateful for. I mean, I would say that what we're doing tonight is only a continuation of that, and then there is so much more that can come from that. As Rabbi said, the Jewish scriptures are the foundation of our belief and trust in God, and so many ways that we can not just learn together, but through this, I think, become a witness, because that's really what it's meant to be. That our communities could become a witness. You know, we're not doing this tonight, and I didn't reach out because I wanted to insert the Catholic Church in any way into what the continued mourning and the continued healing of 2 years ago, but just to say we love you, and I think that this document gives us no hesitation in saying we love you and we care for you, not just because you're our neighbors here in Pittsburgh, but because we are brothers and sisters together, children of God. So.
Rabbi Myers, I know you've been involved in interfaith work since long before you came to Pittsburgh, but in the wake of 1027, and even in the immediate wake, like the day of and the day after, the interfaith community's surrounding of support was very important. And I wondered if you could speak to the role that the interfaith community has played in the response, in Pittsburgh's response to 1027.
Yes, I've been involved in interfaith work since I was ordained, because it was clear to me that A, we're not alone in the world, and B, to work on making a better world, it's not just up to one person, it's up to all of us together, and that the things that bind us together are the things that we hold most dear. And for faith leaders of all faiths, it is that strong faith that's the foundation where we can begin. So from my earliest days, that's how I've been engaged throughout the communities that I've lived in. Of course, it takes time to build those relationships. The difference in Pittsburgh was having only been here scantly more than 1 year when the massacre occurred. I was still in my infancy of reaching out, getting to know Pittsburgh, getting to know the clergy in the community, and it just takes time. Doors instantly opened to me from all faiths. Too many doors in some regard, because it was such an overwhelming response that made it so difficult to fairly reach out equally well to all those that opened their doors, because it was just so many doors. But that being said, I looked at that as a golden opportunity, that if someone is going to open a door to me in friendship and in love and in compassion, I'm going to enter that door, shake that person's hand, and see how we can move forward together. And I've tried to, in the still short time that I've been here, because sometimes it can take a really long time to build those relationships. Little by little, try to continue to grow those relationships with the thread that runs through all of them, that we have so much more in common that we have that's separate and different. And that to me is the grand unifier, by being able to take those and just grow and work with faith leaders of any and all faiths. So all who open their doors to me, I've tried as best as I can so far to respond in kind. It's a lot of nurturing. It's a lot of work, because the grand and beautiful thing about the response in the greater Pittsburgh community was so many faiths. More than there's literally enough time to just cultivate on a daily basis. I could literally just spend every day making phone calls to faith leaders who've reached out and not get anything else done. I mean, that's a pleasant, lovely thing to do, but I have other responsibilities to take care of. But that could literally just take up every single day of my week to do that. It's a nice sort of problem to have, but it's also challenging, because I'm not going to say no to any faith leader, but for me, how to engage all in some meaningful way. It's a nice sort of problem, I guess, to have, but that's indeed the challenge.
Thank you. As we were talking about building unity and bridging differences, of course, we're speaking on election eve, and I know we're all very concerned about the climate that we're in. What are some of the ways we can take the examples of interfaith bridge building and apply that to our current political situation?
I think it comes down to again, what is at the root of all of this is what unites the heart of men and women. And it's so challenging when we see on display what divides us, and so clearly what divides us, that we can get caught up in that. And some of it is the responsibility of us individually to refocus, but then also in the context of community, if we are able to refocus to see what it is that unites us, that we hold common, simply as being brothers and sisters in so many ways. I think there is that opportunity then to go out, and it is so hard to change hearts. It's something that we have to want to do. I really think so, and sometimes we can work so hard in so many things, whether it be in things in our community, whether it be different challenges that families may deal with, or society may deal with. And sometimes we work so hard and yet it still fails, because for whatever reason, others are not willing to have that same perspective. And so just I don't think it is any coincidence that we were able to gather on election eve, and we have these days of remembrance in both of our traditions around election day this year, because I think we wanted to call us to something higher. And whether it be those of us who have chosen to participate here, I think, again, a sign of that willingness to desire to, in our hearts, see what we hold common and dear, and work to build up that respect and love. And then how do we take that further? I think that really becomes the question. How do we take that into our communities, our families, our workplaces? As Rabbi Myers said, it isn't just about what we do when we are inside of our place of worship, or when we are gathered to worship God, but what we do with that when we go from there. And so I hope that again, for us, I think we are committed, we who are gathered tonight, and how do we invite others to that? Because I think ultimately it builds up peace, it builds up strength, It builds up those bonds that are already existing between us and strengthens them.
Mr. Spock in Star Trek #2 said this unforgettable line: "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." I've, over the course of these 2 years, felt that the needs of the greater good of America would only be answered by ordinary citizens, by people themselves. With the pending election, regardless of what the results are, I think America needs to see all of its elected leaders from all parties be able to put aside personal differences, to be able to extend, within safety, hands across the aisles, to return to an era of bipartisanship, to work for the greater good of America. That's the challenge that we elect them to perform. It's time that they stop failing us. It's time that they recognize that's what America needs, and that's how we expect and demand. We must demand of all our elected leaders to behave in that way. But certainly we can't demand it of them unless we don't behave that way as well. Senator Alan Simpson at the funeral for President George H.W. Bush had remarked that the H word corrodes you internally from the core till it literally takes over like a cancer and you're no longer able to function as a human being anymore. It's time to get rid of all of that. There must come a time when all of our elected leaders can sit and work together and cannot impede each other, because when they do, they impede the people who elected them to perform and take care of our needs. Our needs are great. I'd like to think that we have enough good minds, both locally, countywide, statewide, and nationally, to be able to sit down and say, look, here are the problems. We need to sit down and solve them together. That's my challenge to all of our elected leaders. When you can lead.
Thank you. If any of the participants here would like to ask questions, I would suggest going into the chat function, which is the button down at the bottom of the screen there, and type in a question, and I'll do my best to keep up. We did get a couple of questions in advance tonight, and maybe I'll work from the one I got that was more specific to the more general one. But again, it's hard to have a discussion in a vacuum without being mindful of the news of the day. And the news of the day included the news of an attack in Vienna that's being called a terrorist attack. And I think some of the details are still being sorted out, but it happened near a synagogue in Vienna. I'm not sure, maybe some people have more up-to-date information than I do if it was considered a target or not. But obviously, you know, we know these things have happened several times since 10/27, and it, you know, I can't imagine what it's like. It just the triggering effect of this kind of news. And number one, how do you cope, or how do you process that these trigger events that keep happening, and also what can be done to address this, again, to try to find something that can overcome these factors that would lead to these sorts of attacks.
Growing up as a child, I grew up in New Jersey. I'd come to learn that the anti-Semitic acts that my contemporaries, my peers as a child would do, where you'd get into fights all the time because that's was a boy thing to do. So always be in fights because I was Jewish. Kids would throw pennies at me because they said Jews were cheap and we pick up pennies. The most powerful one was when I came home from school one day. I believe I was around 9 years old, 10 years old, the max. There were swastikas on my driveway with the words, "Jeffrey's a dirty Jew." That's when I first learned about the Holocaust. We were not permitted to join the country club in the town I lived in because they didn't allow Jews. And my father was the municipal judge of that town. Years later, when they extended an invitation because the membership was waning, I was immensely proud of my father, she rest in peace, who responded by telling them what they could do with their invitation. But to me, I grew up with that was the price to pay for being a Jew in America, that you had to put up with this because there was no out. You couldn't escape anti-Semitism. More and more leaders, faith leaders, political leaders, communal leaders have continued and continue to speak out about the horrible acts of anti-Semitism that we're seeing on a daily basis. Sociologists could give tons of research and answers as to why we see that. But in the end, it exists. It's the world's oldest virus. There is no injection for a cure. The cure really is when there are more good people in the world than there are evil people, and that those good people finally stop becoming the silent majority and become the vocal majority and say, this behavior is not what entitles you to citizenship in humanity. Whether it's the simplest rule of the golden rule, don't do it to others as others would do unto you. When the majority of humanity rejects unconditionally behaviors like this, that's when we know that the world is improving. It is encouraging when you see more and more leaders speak out against anti-Semitism, be it at home or abroad. It reassures me that there are a lot of really good, decent people out there. We're not hearing from enough of them. The bad news is always what gets splashed across the newspapers and across the internet and across the TV. We need more of the good people speaking up and saying, this doesn't go, this doesn't belong. If you want to be a citizen on this planet, you got to change your ways. It doesn't belong. We need more people who are brave enough to do that.
I know that I can never personally understand or realize what it feels like to receive that kind of hatred so openly shared. I think in different parts of the world at different times, the Catholic Church has certainly experienced persecution, but I don't think anything like what Rabbi Myers speaks of happening in his own lifetime, happening today. I've never experienced anything like that. And so I think that the duty first, just among people of faith and of goodwill, to speak words that build up, not just to not say things that are disparaging or hurtful or hateful, but to go out of our way to say things that encourage and show dignity and honor and value to our brothers and sisters, no matter who they may be. And we know how hard that can be. We know when even someone we love challenges us in some way, it can be so hard to think kindly of them, let alone a stranger, someone who just with so much hatred in their hearts continues to act in that way. And so I just I look, just like he says, from in every facet, in every level of society, as the rabbi said, just not only to speak against it, but to truly work to set an example. I was just thinking back to when Rabbi Myers spoke of that idea that it starts with us. That then let's show it. Let's do it. Let's really be intentional about those things. And it's hard because there is so much we want to be intentional about in working for good. But I think those little steps go such a long way, and may yet be another one of those things that we can do when we are confronted in it in just even casual conversation, to speak up, to not be afraid, whatever the injustice or the hurt or the speaking down may be. I think there are many opportunities that we can bring light in those areas.
Thank you. And another question that we received before the gathering was, and it's a basic one, but it's an important one, which is, why do bad things happen to good people?
Great title for a book. Oh, it was already taken. Thought of that a lot, particularly within our faith. We read a portion of the Torah week after week. Just 2 weeks ago, we read of Noah. After Noah has disembarked, all the animals are off safely, everyone's getting settled, he sends a sacrifice to God as an act of gratitude. God smells the pleasing aroma, and God makes the most remarkable statement. God says, I know from man's youth that his inclination is towards evil. You think for a moment, wow. God just admits that this creation, these humans that he's created are not perfect, but not only that there's an inclination to just do evil. And I remarked about it this past Friday night in my address during services, that I'm out to prove God wrong. We all have choices every single day. And I don't mean the simplest of choices of, gee, what do I have for breakfast? Or what tie do I put on? Choices. We have choices in how we interact with every single person in society that we see or meet. Granted, it might be fewer. I'll give you a perfect example. If you go food shopping, if you feel brave enough to go food shopping, you go food shopping. Do you engage in a simple, hello, how are you today moment to the cashier? Or do you just grunt and pay your bill and leave? I used to think about this as a child growing up in New Jersey. For those of you who know New Jersey, one of the two major highways is called the Garden State Parkway. The Garden State Parkway was built to connect the people in North Jersey with the beaches, which is where I grew up. There were toll booths. It was like a large basket, even bigger than the biggest collection basket you could ever hope for, Father Vaskov. Back then, the tolls were a quarter. Now they're like $1.50, $2. So you would throw a quarter into the big basket, or if you were trying to be a wise guy, your friend who was sitting on the right-hand side would try to do a hook shot over the car and see if you could get the quarter into the basket. But if you didn't have exact change, you'd go to one of the other lanes and there'd be a toll collector there. And I remember William Sapphire, if you remember that name, when he used to write for the New York Times Magazine section. And he commented, how many of you just say good day to the toll collector? So he called the people who did that, who did not do that, who couldn't even say good day, infrahumans. So how many of us are infrahumans that don't take the simplest of time to say that, or to thank the person who bagged our groceries in Giant Eagle and say, thank you for bagging my groceries today. those sorts of things. It starts in the smallest of ways, and we grow it by all the things that we do. So we each have decisions to make. Are we going to prove God right? Or are you going to have the temerity, or as we say in Yiddish, the chutzpah, to say to God, you're wrong. For me, you're wrong. I choose to do good. I choose to say that my inclination is good. That's a decision we make every day with every single thing that we do. So part of the answer as to why does evil exist in the world is because there are people who make the wrong choices. From my perspective, God is not up in this divine control room, like behind the curtain for the Wizard of Oz, pushing buttons and pulling levers and everything and saying, I'm going to wreak havoc here, and I'm going to have a monsoon here in India, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. That's not God. God put it all into play, and God's the one we turn to in moments of challenge to give us hope, to give us inspiration, to give us strength to go on. So I choose to do good. I choose to prove God wrong with what he said to Noah, and I choose to turn to my God to encourage me to do even more good. There are those people who can't live that way for whatever the reason may be. They're the ones that God talks about. But every single day, everyone has choices to make. I just say, choose good.
I love that. And that's exactly where my mind and heart was in all of this. God, while we may have this inclination to evil, God made us good. But I don't think it ends at good, because we talk about free will and all of those things. Free will is meant to choose the good. That's the responsibility that comes with it. And good is the first level. When we talk about good, we have good, better, best. And to live at our best, exactly as Rabbi Myers says, it's not so much in the big things. I can follow the commandment, thou shalt not kill. But what lies underneath that? And to flip the commandments to say, thou shalt not kill, no, that thou shalt honor all life. And just as Rabbi said, saying good day to someone, honoring them in recognizing someone in the simplest thing. Or thou shalt not steal. No. Thou shalt live generously with gratitude and giving of every fiber of our being. That's to live our best. And we know it's a great challenge. We know it's the challenge of a lifetime. It isn't something that we can ever do perfectly from our first breath. But as we grow in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge through all of the experiences of our life, both good and bad, we see how important that call is. And it doesn't mean that bad won't happen to us. In fact, I think sometimes the more we strive to be faithful to God, maybe the more that we should expect that suffering. But we trust that God allows it. And they're trite sayings, but God doesn't bring us to something that he won't bring us through. And so just to look at all that he has created within us and all that he has created in the world around us, to live for the best, and to be challenged in that, but I like the way Rabbi says, to prove God wrong, that we can overcome all of those things that seek to draw us away from him and from each other, and to live in his light.
Thank you very much. We are approaching the end of our hour. I will just conclude by reading a comment from Audrey Glickman. She's a member of Tree of Life. Welcome, Audrey. This seems like a good, appropriate comment to end on. There are so many attacks happening at so many different religious institutions of all varieties that this seems to be the latest vehicle of blame for the ills of society. Blame those of the other religion. This is a large task on all of us. Those of us who have felt hate want even more to reach out to those falling victim, I think. With that, I want to thank you all for attending tonight and for listening. Thank you, Rabbi Myers. Thank you, Father Vaskov, for your very thoughtful and personal responses. So I want to thank you all for coming. We'll be concluding. Father Nick will say a closing prayer, and then we'll have some closing music. And I want to also thank our musicians, Thomas and Carissa. Thank you so much for the music that you've provided tonight.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, source of love, you move human hearts so that enemies may speak to each other again. Adversaries join hands. Hatred is overcome by love. Revenge gives way to forgiveness, and discord is changed to mutual respect. Grant us the grace to contribute, together with all people of goodwill, to the fulfillment of your will, that they may all be one. With faith, we ask you for the divine gift of unity. Give us enough love and courage to seek to overcome disunity, whether it is friction in our families, tensions in our neighborhood, divisions in our country, disagreements at work, in our congregations, or among different religious groups. Help us to enter into honest and respectful dialogue. Keep us from being indifferent. Soften our hearts, open our ears. Help us to listen with close attention to each other, sharing in the pain caused by their wounds. Help us to build bridges that unite us. Make us instruments of your peace. We humbly pray to you, allow us, your children, to live in solidarity with all people, and so to honor you, who are the Father of all, and who live and reign forever and ever. Amen.
Tis thy gift to be simple, tis thy gift to be free, tis thy gift to come down where you have to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When the true simplicity is made, to bow and to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn, will be our delight, till by turning we come round And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When the true simplicity is